coming today. I want to open the hearings for the Lancaster Wetlands Board today. I'm Bruce Julian, acting chair for the hearings today. Our chair, Edna Revere, and vice chair, Cecil Little, are dealing with some health issues today, so Edna has asked me to chair the hearings today. In reviewing the applications that we had on the agenda today that were published in the legal notice, I took note that several of the applications were filed over 3 months ago with VMRC. I want to personally apologize to the landowners, agents, and contractors for these inexcusable delays. This is not reflective of the level of service and responsiveness to the public we are sworn to deliver. However, this is a volunteer board, and all other boards and committees appointed by the Board of Supervisors cannot perform their sworn duties without adequate and sufficient staff and financial resources. I want to make a few other opening remarks today and as a whole, and thank the board members here today. Introduce them quickly. Hunter Sled down here, Will Tolles, Andy Ransone, Hap Had down here. From staff level, at the county level, Brian Barnes, Glenn Rao, Crystal Way, and Bill Farrell. And from the state level, VMRC, Jay Woodward. Also want to encourage everybody to feel free to express themselves during the particular hearings on these applications. We've got some additional agenda items we're going to add at the end of the hearings that the board may want to entertain discussion on. Okay, I think we're ready to roll down this aggressive agenda. We are going to try to expedite matters today and hopefully not delay critical work on shorelines any longer. First on the agenda is Mangus Erickson, VMRC number 22-0111. And helping me today is going to be Mr. Will. Would you please read the legal notice? Anyone representing Mr. Mangus today?
I'm here.
Please step forward to the mic and introduce yourself.
I'm Magnus Eriksson, 335 Redwood Lane, Wings.
Thank you.
Magnus Erickson and Amelia Erickson, owner agents, request permission to construct 32 linear foot of riprap revetment along the shoreline of Moran Creek, located off of VSH 675 Black Stump Road on Redwood Lane, map number 26-136, VMRC number 22-0111.
Mr. Erickson, you're recognized to present your project. I would let everybody know this is the third time you've been appeared on the agenda, so hopefully we can expedite your application.
And I would apologize for that. So the previous meetings, certainly my delay, I had conflicting board meetings, so I apologize for that. But this time it worked, so I'm grateful for that. So the project is I would like to refer the board to these pictures here in the material. I think that's the easiest way to follow. So I have recently installed 400 feet of riprap on the shoreline facing Moran Creek. There is a little piece inside the river here where I used to have a wooden structure that would hold back the erosion. That structure was very deteriorated, so there wasn't much left, and it fell apart when we installed the riprap. So I would now like to do a small retaining wall here with riprap stone to keep the erosion back. The current, when it comes in, it rips around that spur pretty fast. It rips out the dirt, and then it places it on my neighbor's beach. So I'll need to kind of keep that clean and neat. The picture you see here is an extreme low tide. Today we have an extreme high tide. So now the water goes up to where you see the hay bales there on the picture. So that's the project, trying to stop the erosion here and make a good neighbor.
Thank you. Glenn, do we happen to have anybody on line here today?
We do have 3 attendees online.
Okay. Since Mr. Barnes disappeared again, I'll call on Mr. Woodward. Do you have any comments or concerns with this project?
No, there's a lot of history here. This is essentially the last little bit of the shoreline that Mr. Erickson wants to address. VMRC issued a permit for the stone out in front of the bulkhead, but where that bulkhead ended, there's a small spur of stone that's still there now, but it wasn't protecting that upland bank. So the current proposal doesn't require a permit from VMRC. It's all above the low water line.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the Army Corps just said the project is fine.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that as part of this permit, there was a previous VMRC violation.
The stone in front of the bulkhead got started before the permit was actually issued, so it was an after-the-fact situation. There was also some work on a boathouse, again, all of it subaqueous, all of it VMRC, and all of it resolved at this point.
No concerns then with VMRC.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Barnes, do you have any comments or concerns you'd like to express?
No, not at this time. As Mr. Woodward said, those issues, to my knowledge, have been cleared up. The issue with the boathouse has been cleared up with VMRC. There's a bit of disturbance in the 100 that normally is a bit on the high side as far as what we would prefer to have a landscape plan agreement for that ahead of time. But in this case, discussions with Mr. Erickson, the idea is to get, if he's going to get approval, get it for him so he can get that area stabilized again and as soon as possible.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the, either online or in the audience today that would like to speak in reference to this application? Okay, Glenn, no hands up. Board members, I'll call on you for any concerns or questions you'd like to ask Mr. Erickson. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Move the project be approved as it's presented.
Motion's been to approve. And seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Erickson.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Rich P. and Colleen Donofrio, VMRC permit number application 22-0617. And it looks like Mr. Craig is representing this client.
Yes, sir.
Please identify. Please identify yourself.
Craig Paladinsky with Bay Shore Design. I'm the agent representing this request.
Rich P. and Colleen D'Onofrio, care of Bayshore Design LLC, 9 Steamboat Road, Steamboat Landing, Kinsale, Virginia, 22488. Request permission to construct 179 linear foot riprap revetment along the shoreline of Jack's Cove of Carter Creek, located off of VSH 637 James Wharf Road on Jack's Cove Lane. Map number 33-496A, VMRC number 22-0617.
Thanks, Will. Craig, floor is yours.
Okay. All right, what we're proposing here is a 179 linear foot riprap revetment along the toe of a wooded bank, starting on the west property line. We're tying into an adjacent riprap revetment, following the base of the bank and terminating over on a low area on the east side of the property where there's an access way to come down to the shoreline. The bank varies in height anywhere from some places about maybe 6 to 15 feet in height. The bank is wooded, mature wooded vegetation on the bank that is not slumping or has no need to be graded. And again, it is north-facing shoreline. So we felt that the riprap revetment was the best remedy here to stabilize this bank. In order to achieve a living shoreline design, we would need to clear out the bank and grade it back. to get sufficient sunlight to allow living shoreline to function properly here. So in looking at that, and given that it's a north-facing shoreline and the limited sun exposure, we felt the toe revetment along the base of the bank was the proper method to stabilize this bank. There are some sections of that bank, it is undercut a good 2, some places 4 feet back into it. So what we're proposing is a Class A1 revetment coming up about 3 to 4 feet in height above the mud line at the base of the bank, base width of about 5 to 6 feet, 3/4 of a ton per foot revetment. That's pretty much all I have, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Anyone in the audience or online would like to speak to this application? Okay. Mr. Barnes, would you like to have any concerns or comments, questions?
No, sir.
Mr. Woodward?
No comment, doesn't require a permit from
Thank-
VMRC, it's above low water.
Thank you. Questions or comments from board members?
One of the attachments has the depths on here. Is that one of the reasons why we didn't use a living shoreline?
Right, as I had stated earlier, it is a north-facing bank with really no sun exposure to the shoreline, and you have a mature wooded bank that would need to be graded to facilitate a living shoreline method there. So that's why we chose not to do living shoreline, because it just would not function without grading the bank back.
The only question I have, Craig, I presume that this project will be installed by water?
It would have an access point on that access way, and there'd be a floater around the property, so yeah.
That's the
That's
existing
kind of a floater. It's
low
kind of a
access.
staging area, use that access way that's already there to
Okay.
get down to the shoreline.
That's where the pier would attach in that
Yes.
access area? Okay. Other questions or concerns, comments? Hearing none, I will entertain motion from the board.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. A call for a vote. All in favor, raise your right hand to approve as submitted. Thank you, Craig.
Okay, thank you.
Next on the agenda, application from Daryl Adams, VMRC number 220364. Who's representing him? Mr. Scott. Please identify yourself.
Good morning, Joseph Scott, P.O. Box 315, Kilmarnock, Virginia, 22482. I'm the agent for the applicant.
Thank you.
Darrell S. Adams, care of Joseph Scott, P.O. Box, Kilmarnock, Virginia, 22482. Request permission to construct a 205-foot linear revetment, 180-foot linear feet of core logs with associated wetlands planting along the shoreline of Dimers Creek, located off VSH 650 Flips Bay Road on Coppage Farm Road, tax map number 29-69A, VMRC number 22-0364.
So yes,
Mr. Scott.
this is going to be a revetment on the on the open fetch side of this particular property to protect the back shore. I don't know if you're able to see it when you went down there because the tide is so high. It didn't really look that bad until I got down on it, and it is undercut up in there 3 to 4 feet in places. They're getting a lot of energy at some point, and I guess what's happening is there must have been a sand layer or something below the topsoil layer that's just kind of getting blown out. In order to do a living shoreline to kind of extend that French marsh there would probably, much like Craig was talking about with his project, would probably require a considerable amount of grading up into the yard. There's some pine trees there. There's some other things there that are going to make that kind of problematic. So we're hoping to just tow that in and actually remove a good chunk of the yard. If there wasn't vegetated wetlands there, it would actually be out of our jurisdiction by digging up the yard and putting the rock there. But something to protect the back shore, and then to go offshore to put the core logs out there to hopefully kind of rehabilitate the marsh that's out in front of that grass. There's several revetments on this particular cove that have grass growing in front of them, and You know, just figured that this is going to be the best way to protect the back shore without having to do major tree removal and grading up onto, up into the yard. Because the bank is 4 to 5 feet tall in spots, so. It's a little, I won't say unorthodox, but kind of go with what we got there, and path of least resistance in terms of construction, and kind of try to help the fringe marsh flourish a little more, because obviously it's not providing enough protection, so.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments from the audience or Glenn online? Mr. Barnes, comments or concerns?
I think just to be consistent with the living shoreline mandate, I might, if I were on the board, make a motion that the motion to approve include a condition that the core logs and plantings be a part of the project. In other words, not one component. In other words, you get an approval to put in 3 groins and you only put 2, you're not in violation. Make the plantings a condition of the permit. That way the plantings are done as well. We've had several cases in the past few years where people, when they got to the construction phase, just omitted the plantings. And I feel like in many cases, the plantings and the wetland enhancement that might be proposed is one reason a board would approve a project. And if they're omitted at the construction phase, we're not accomplishing our goals.
So,
Just a thought.
So but the plantings and the core logs are part of the entire application?
Yes.
So if somebody's done that in the past, they really have not implemented the application
Correct.
as permitted?
Yeah, and especially if I can think of a case of a project that we did several years ago on Carter Creek where there were several groins proposed with revetment on the back shore. The inter-groin area was supposed to be planted to wetland vegetation and sand nourishment. When it got to the construction phase, the contractor just decided to omit the plantings because he didn't feel like he wanted to plant them. That wasn't necessarily a violation because it was just one of the components of the project. There were various components. If you decide to omit one, if it's not a condition of the approval, then staff don't have much to go on as far as enforcement.
But if it's approved in total, it is a total project, the board could take a violation
Yeah, right.
action?
That's up to you guys. If you would like to make that a part of your approval, you could do that. You could say approve with the condition that the plantings and the core logs be included in the
Okay.
riprap revetment project.
Thanks. Thank you. Jay?
First of all, it's above mean low water, so it doesn't require a VMRC permit. But I concur with Brian. By adding that as a permit condition or a stipulation in the permit, it gives you more enforcement authority should that component, which is the living shoreline component, not be done. Then that would kind of throw the backshore revetment into a violation mode because you're approving one on the condition that the other is approved. In this case, I agree, I think it is a living shoreline, but if the applicant or the contractor decides to not do that other part, whereas a lot of times, if the project isn't done, it's not a violation if you do less than what was approved. But in this case, that core log component is critical to the living shoreline component that would allow you all to approve the project. So again, I think Brian's point is well made, that it just gives you all more enforcement authority or more legs to stand on if the project is not done in accordance with the plans.
Thank you. Comments or questions from board members?
Is this a project that we could go back and look at a year after it's implemented to learn from, this particular approach about whether or not it in fact establishes a living shoreline?
I think we have the authority to go back and look at any project to see the success or implementation or how things have have borne out. I think we have that authority, do we not, Mr. Barnes?
That's correct.
We can spot check or maybe learn from how treatments work.
Well, I would just suggest that we put that on the list and in a year's time, actually go back and look at it and see how it works.
I guess this part, the part of changing a permitted application is still a bit puzzling to me. If, we're approving this application as submitted by Mr. Scott, and if a landowner decides to reduce the rock size, eliminate filter fabric, not plant things, any of those things would be a violation of the permit. Not just living things, but anything. And if we got class 1 rock specified by the agent and the guy puts gravel out there, that doesn't seem like that's we permitted that. So I would just point that out. Any other questions or concerns from the board? Entertain a motion.
Move that the project be approved conditionally, that the plantings take place, and that the core logs be included in the project.
Here a second.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is a permit application from Michael and Sharon Phillips, VMRC number 22-0455. Who's representing that application?
Joseph Scott, P.O. Box 315, Kilmarnock, Virginia 22482. I'm the agent for the applicant.
Thank you. Will.
Michael and Sharon Phillips, care of Joseph Scott, request permission to construct 2 armorstone groins, 48 foot linear feet channelward of mean low water, extend an existing groin 10 linear feet, construct a 30-foot stone spur, add associated beach nourishment, and construct a 50-foot linear riprap revetment along the shoreline of Fleets Bay, located off VSH 647 Akron Road on Bald Eagle Point, map number 35A-2-1 and 35-82A, VMRC number 220455.
Go ahead, Joey.
So the site was staked. It just didn't survive.
We saw them, yes, we saw the tops of the stakes
The
yesterday.
remnants. It didn't survive this mess that we've had in the last 3 or 4 days. So yes, this project has been modified from what was originally proposed. The objection from the neighbors that was sent in regarding various property lines and who owned what, all of that has been taken into account. So that the area that is on your revised drawing from May the 6th, there's a section in there that's like a lighter color blue. That property is actually owned by Bald Eagle Road LLC, which is the applicant. So this whole area where we have revised the groins to fit are all within what I've supplied to you is owned by the applicant. We provided the deed, we provided the survey, we provided the survey of that the neighbors provided as well. So the 30-foot spur and all of the stuff that, if you're looking at that picture up there, would be on the lower right-hand portion of the picture. None of that is being proposed anymore. That has been completely dropped from the application. All we're sticking with is 2 groins that are going to connect to the existing revetment, and sand that will be added there. The applicants just have decided to not go down the road of who owns the right-of-way or all of that. You know, when I say right-of-way, I'm talking about the 50-foot section that's considered to be Bald Eagle Road. So with that revision, essentially what we're doing is adding 2 stone groins to this particular area here in hopes to accumulate some sand to create a non-vegetated wetland beach. And it will likely provide additional toe protection to that stone that's already there. This is pretty common on a lot of the jobs that I do up in the Potomac. When you have a very rank spot like this that has a huge fetch and gets a lot of northeast batter, especially now that Grog Island is gone. Groins are typically used. Everyone puts groins out because they like to accumulate a beach, but in many situations, they're out there to actually help protect the toe from scouring out. Even in situations like this where the toe of the armor stone could be down 3 or 4 feet, and I've seen that scour out. So the goal for Ms. Phillips and her husband are to put the groins out there, accumulate a beach on that particular section, and it should add to the overall benefit of that particular area that's in there. The neighbors to the north, their shoreline is completely hardened, and the neighbors to the south, we've not received any objection from the standpoint of that they believe that the groins would disrupt enough of the sand flow to be detrimental. There's already a couple breakwaters down there. You guys probably saw they're pretty disconnected. I think a lot of the sand has gone up back around there and is into that cove that used to be there. But the goal is to put these in to build that beach, and we've applied also for the beach nourishment to be put in while they're there so that any sort of disruption along that shoreline in terms of sand movement will be minimized. So, do you guys have any questions, and do you follow all of the revisions and the deeds and the surveys?
We received your revisions
Okay.
promptly. We were also we weren't able Tuesday to approach the site since the water was so deep on the road out there, but 2 of us went out there yesterday at low tide and captured these pictures so we could help the rest of the board members take action on this today. I also, before we move into opening comments, I want to remind folks that the jurisdiction of this board does not involve property lines, disputes. Our jurisdiction is strictly prescribed in the Code of Virginia and the ordinances of this county. So we are only dealing today at this hearing with what activities are proposed within our jurisdiction, which is very specific. Is there anyone here today that wants to speak in regards to this application? Please approach the mic. And please state your name and address.
My name is Sudha Sundar, and
Please, a little closer to the mic.
my name is Sudha Sundar, and our property is 874 Bald Eagle Road, the one that you can see on the picture over there. And our concerns have already been documented and sent us an email, along with others in the community. And our biggest challenge is that that road is washing away. So on our behalf, our neighbor Lena and Rennie had talked to Michael and Sharon, and they had agreed to help us protect that road. When the initial plan came out, it pointed out that the riprap they were suggesting was within the right-of-way. So we requested that there be a change to the drawing to move that riprap to right outside the right-of-way. But in the revision, we noticed that the entire riprap has been removed. Well, if we don't have that riprap, it's a matter of time, maybe just even a month before that road goes away. And as of now, even the U.S. Postal Service will not deliver to us because that road they consider as hazard. And I'm not sure if we need 911 or fire emergency, if we'll even get the help. So I request that the original plan where the riprap was placed is put back, but put back outside the boundary of the right-of-way. Thank you.
Let me clarify. This is your house we're looking at here?
Yes,
Okay. And this road here, is this a public road?
it's it is an easement just to those two properties that are there. There are actually 3 lots.
So it's a private road,
Yes, it's a private road, and that's the only access to those homes.
all right? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Other comments or concerns to be expressed? Mr. Barnes, do you have any comments or concerns you'd like to express?
No, you guys have the packet before you has all of the adjacent property owner comments we've received, even ones that were received this morning. You also have a revision in front of you that shows the groin positioning instead of what was proposed before. Oops, thank you. You have the, I believe you also have a shoreline progression report from 1937 to present that shows the shoreline evolution in this area. So pretty high fetch environment. The actual jurisdiction you guys have, if you look on the revision that Mr. Scott submitted, the plan view, your jurisdiction is really only that intertidal area right in front of that existing riprap. Anything below mean low is going to have to go to VMRC. So you really have only about 20 square feet, 30 square feet of jurisdiction in this. So it's jurisdictionally, this is not a big ask given the fetch. There are some other issues here, and I hope that the neighbors are able to come together and come up with a way to solve the problem. We looked at some other pictures this morning of the driveway submitted from other adjacent property owners, and there's some major overwash happening where that riprap terminated. Some of you guys were on the board, or you remember many years ago, that riprap began as an after the fact. I went down there to do an inspection of the house under construction at the end, and the riprap was being built without a permit. So we stopped it. It went to an after the fact procedure and then was completed.
So what you're saying is that the original riprap was placed illegally without a permit?
Correct. So that did not give this board and the process a chance to come up with a good shoreline management plan. And I think you see the results of that now, because where it terminates, you always get that energy to flank, and it's coming right into that 50-foot, what's called 50-foot property owners right away, the shaded blue area on Mr. Scott's plan. And that erosion, of course, now is starting to eat away at the utility pole and other things. But I think the wise thing would be for these owners to get together now and come up with a way to extend that riprap. As you all know, wherever riprap ends, that energy is going to go somewhere. And you look at those shoreline reports from 1935, somebody put in a groin or a riprap revetment or something, and then things start happening in the next decades around it. And riprap begets riprap. So I think that's what you're seeing. You guys are only here today to look at just those two snapshots right there where those groins will lock into the existing riprap revetment and go out. The sand nourishment is generally permitted here and is probably a good thing to do. I would advise putting lots and then some more. But all the other things are going to be up to a later plan. You
I
don't have that
want to
before you
make,
right now.
we see we've got one person on comment, and I'll have you next. Glenn, do we have somebody on internet? Are they mic on? Please identify yourself, state your name and your address.
My name is Rennie Barnes, 900 Bald Eagle Way.
Proceed with your comments. You may proceed.
I was listening to what Brian said. I'm not sure at what point, but the riprap that's put in that's there now along the shoreline, I had a permit to do that when I built a house back in 2011. So that was a legal riprap. And when that was put in, the area right now that we're talking about, including riprap, was all land. As a matter of fact, there was beach there 10 years ago. We've been trying to work with Sharon and Mike Phillips now for 3 years, and the road continues to wash away. And we need to do something so that we can get to our house. If it's left with nothing done, in a couple of years, we won't be able to access our property unless we go by boat. So I'm perplexed why we can't protect that road so we can get to our house. It's that simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Any other comments, Glenn, online? Before we go, Joey, Jay, do you have any comments or concerns you want to express here?
I would say that the original plan had a spur that came off of the existing groin, kind of where you would be standing in this photograph. All of the lands channelward of the mean low water line, this is a high tide photo, all of the lands channelward of mean low water, regardless of who used to own them, are now part of the Commonwealth of Virginia. The submerged lands of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Both the groins that are proposed now, the sand that will be placed channelward of mean low water, will need a permit from VMRC. The groins are too wide to qualify for a general permit. If there were timber groins, it would likely just get a general permit. What I would say is I understand what the issue is. I think there's some history between the parties involved. If the folks that need to protect that road to be able to maintain access to their property would like to build a structure on the submerged lands of the Commonwealth, i.e. a breakwater, channelward of low tide, at the very end of that road, or a spur coming off of the channelward portion of that existing groin, they are welcome to do that. The adjacent property owner would be the Phillips. They would be notified, much like when someone applies for a mooring on state bottom. It's a structure that's on state bottom that is not tied to upland real estate, whether or not it's in the person's riparian area. That's neither here nor there. It's the Commonwealth of Virginia would issue a permit, presumably, for a structure to protect that end of that 50-foot right-of-way. I don't know that it's necessary for the Phillips to do that. If they would like to do that, that's, we would also address that at the time. It seemed to me that when the application was submitted, there was enough confusion and contention that who owns what where, that's when that particular part of the project, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, was abandoned because, yes, it's in the footprint of the right-of-way, which used to be land owned by somebody else before it eroded. There was some stone above the board's jurisdiction, channelward of the high tide line, not on the beach, that would have helped protect the turn of that road. That was a source of contention, and so that was abandoned to alleviate the contention. This is all my understanding of how things happened. So while I understand that the property owners that use this road would like to protect that road, I don't know that they can make the Phillips protect that road. If they want to protect the road and build a breakwater out there, they could apply for a permit to do so and backfill with sand, and we would notify the adjacent property owners. And who pays the bill, that's up to whoever brings the project forward. But I don't know the language on the right-of-way, whether it ties the ownership of that property to a responsibility to maintain that road. I don't need to know that. That's not VMRC jurisdiction, it's not Wetland Board jurisdiction. So in a perfect world, the neighbors would all get together and go, what do we need to do here to solve this problem? And they would come up with a solution, but that's not where we are right now. We have an application that's complete, that is been advertised properly, and the applicants have a right to a decision. And once the Wetlands Board can render a decision, if it's in the affirmative, we will also issue a permit. If the objection remains, we will have another one of these hearings down in Hampton at Fort Monroe, and I will say what I'm saying now, and they, whoever objects can object, but I don't know that what's being proposed currently will further damage the road. It'll offer anything you can put out there, sand-wise or structure-wise, to break down some of that wave energy is going to help the situation. Clearly, it's a dynamic area. The shoreline used to be probably 200 yards east of where it is now, but it's not there now. And therefore, those submerged lands are not under ownership by anybody on any of these plats. It's the mean low water line is the boundary between private property and the Commonwealth.
Thanks, Jay, for those comments. And let me make sure I understand. So the Commonwealth of Virginia owns up to mean low water, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Beyond that, it's private.
The old saying is, private property erodes to the benefit of the Commonwealth. Private property accretes to the benefit of the upland property owner, naturally.
Right.
Now, if you go out there and dump a bunch of stuff, that's not Mother Nature accreting, that's you dumping stuff.
So as we see witnessed, very much so the last few days, with this rise in sea level, the Commonwealth's ownership of property is increasing.
In this particular area, it would appear such.
And I guess also to just, since I happened to be out there yesterday, Brian, it appears to me this original private road was built on top of a dune.
It looks that way now, but when you look at the, especially that shoreline evolution report, you can see that even in the 1930s, there was farmland there, much further out. So if you had left it alone, it probably would have a dune there, but it was actually built up. Okay. When the house construction, the original access road in 2008, when I started working here, was really low. I mean, it was not much higher than the beach level, and it's been built up to allow for that riprap to have kind of a backshore to it. But as you saw in the last couple of days, even that's not high enough for the kind of tides you're getting this week. But yeah, it's usually dunes formed by that overtopping action, and if human input was not an issue, you probably would have some dunes there.
Thank you. Joey, would you like to respond?
No, just because this will probably go to VMRC, and who knows, it may end up in court. I think that it's important that the record reflect, and Ryan might be able to confirm this because the homeowners can, the illegal riprap placement was prior to the Phillips owning this property. So is that correct, Brian? I believe it was owned by the previous property owner. I don't know what shook out, but I don't want that to kind of taint this, that even though these are connected into things that are shown by them, that was actually done before the folks who own it now own it. So
we're only dealing with today's
Oh yeah, I know,
application.
but just for a point of information and in the record. So
And I would say, I just want to key off one thing that Jay said to remind everybody in the audience who might be their first time here, every decision of this board is appealable. Every decision is appealable to Virginia Marine Resources Commission. Thank you, Jay, for pointing that out.
Correct. I would also, to tag on to Joey, while the prior work on that road was done without a permit before it was done, it was later granted after the fact authorization, much like Mr. Erickson's project. So it's currently authorized to be there. It's not an ongoing violation. It's
and really not in jurisdiction of this board. Glenn, you had somebody online there?
Mr. Barnes wanted to speak
Mr.
again.
Barnes, proceed. Mr. Barnes?
If you could ask Joey to come back to the podium. I gave a suggestion to him after we saw the permit that the Phillips, the latest permit the Phillips suggested, and I made some changes to it to add riprap in the 50-foot right-of-way area and close to the end of where the existing riprap is. And we're perfectly willing and happy to pay for that. It's the Phillips up to this point in time, and not to be contentious, have told us they would not allow us to protect the road. So we're kind of at a log jam, but we're willing to pay for that extra riprap if Mr. Joe Scott would show you all what I proposed to see if that makes any sense to Jay and to Brian, and we're happy to pay for that. All we want to do is get access to our house.
Do you want to respond to this?
To protect, and if we don't do that, we won't have access to our house, and the county won't get taxes for the
So, yes,
property. Thank you.
So yes, I talked to Mr. Barnes on Monday, and he said he was going to send me a sketch of what he thought we should do there, and that's fine. Send me whatever you want. I never received it, and I'm really busy right now, so I wasn't going to go down and track it down because I knew to a certain extent if it's anything outside of what has already been advertised, we can't do anything with it today anyway. So it's the sort of thing where I never received it, but had I received it, I could show it to you, but there's nothing that you guys, at least I'm not an attorney, but the way that I understand it, there's nothing that you guys can act on today because it would be something new added to a application that is already existing that had not been properly advertised. So in the end, I guess it's kind of, it goes back to what Jay maybe had, asked earlier, that maybe everyone should get together and discuss and look at the drawing and say, okay, this looks good. And now they have to, whomever is the 50-foot right-of-way folks, whoever owns it would have to fill out an application. That's just my understanding of how it works in my 17 years of doing this. So.
Thanks. Now we see, I have another hand in the back would like to speak. And we have another one on the line that would like to speak as well. Just hang on a second. Please,
Good morning, gentlemen.
please identify yourself and your address.
Good morning, gentlemen. Sharon Phillips, 43 Fiddler Crab Lane. I do apologize for my appearance this morning. I have been planting on Main Street. We are dressing Main Street for the spring and summer. In 2016, my husband Mike and I purchased 43 Fiddler Crab Lane. Since October of 2016, I have met 3 times with Mr. Barnes in an attempt to resolve the issue. We have asked to go in together. Again, 3 separate occurrences. I have taken our concepts, our ideas, sketches, drawings over to him, and he has sent me home. He has not been interested in any concept that I have presented to him. I can only say that. And I most recently went to him probably a year ago, maybe a little longer than a year ago. And the drawing that I presented to him is very similar to what our original proposal was. Our original proposal incorporated the existing rock line, which is just out of this view. That is out of the 50-foot right-of-way. As a matter of fact, that rock wall belongs to my parents. They have clearly not objected to that was our original proposal. When the adjacent property owners voiced their concerns regarding the usage of that existing rock wall, we responded to that concern very quickly and submitted an amended proposal, which was entirely in our own property line. I appreciate all the hard work that this board does. We have attempted to communicate. Again, there are several property owners here. We have even asked for a mediation between the property owners. Our legal team has reached out to their legal team and asked for a mediation. That has been done 2 or 3 weeks ago. We have not heard from any of those property owners. So again, I would just like to let the board know that, as a matter of fact, we have been rather forward-thinking. And it is at the point where everything is critical and crucial. We certainly hear the need for them to repair their road because, quite frankly, without repairing their road, my yard is at an absolute risk The water from yesterday, the road breaches in 2 places, and that causes my yard to fill in. I think when you were down there yesterday, you probably saw the 2 places where that beach completely breaches. And then the waves from the bay just roll over my yard. It is absolutely in everyone's best interest to repair that corner. I don't think that the application that we have in front of you today impedes any future ability to repair that road, but given how many times I've already been to Mr. Barnes, and the fact that once again, Mr. Barnes has suggested that there might be some illustration he would present, we still don't have it. We're here today to talk about the 2 grow-ins and what was advertised. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
I just want to make sure I clearly understand what we're looking at here. We are only talking about 2 groins. We're not talking about all these things that all these people are commenting about.
No, sir. Thank you. That is correct.
Okay.
And we had Glenn, someone on the line. Mr. Barnes, please proceed.
Yes,
Please make
I
please make your
understand what
comments
Sharon said.
please make your comments brief on any new information.
this is Rennie Barnes speaking again, and I understand what Sharon said, and I don't agree with what she said. All we want to do, and would she sit down with Brian or Jay, let us figure out how we can protect the road. That's all we're requesting, and we'll pay for it. She has not been willing to do that at this point in time, so I disagree with what she said. But can you guys help us save our road,
Thank you.
please?
Thank you, Mr.
And help
Barnes.
her too. Thank you.
Are
Thank
there,
you.
are there any concerns, questions that the board members would like to express? I have a hand here in the audience. Mr. McKinley?
Yes, sir.
Mic, please.
Thank you.
The microphone.
I am here today representing Mr. and Mrs. Barnes on another matter. But based on the comments that Jay has made, I will sit with them and discuss the possibility of constructing an offshore breakwater, channelward of mean low water, in this gap that exists there between the groins and the existing riprap, and that could very well end up being a solution to this issue. I've worked with the Barnes for a long time, and I will certainly approach them with that prospect. I wasn't aware that if you were not the riparian landowner, that you could apply for a project in front of that property, not being the owner of that property. But based on Jay's comments, I feel like that may be an avenue for us to proceed. I just wanted to mention that to the board.
Thank you, Mr. McKinley. Joey, could you take the mic again? I got a couple questions. Looking at your cross-sectional drawings on the intersections, could you just, those, am I reading this right, that you've got, just explain the elevations of those cross-sections there. You got one at the channelward end is mean high, landward end's a foot above.
Yes, roughly a foot above, 14-foot base. It's going to be armor stone, so it has to have an enormous base. More obviously, it's not going to stay there. And yes, the goal would be to have about a foot above mean high water, which if you were down there looking at that scum line on the rock is essentially about where it's black, is kind of what I would say where it would come out of there. So about halfway up. As low a profile as you can get with armor stone.
What's the slopes on those
On
side
each of the
slopes?
On each of the sides with the 14-foot base should give us about the minimum of 1.5 to 1, but most of the time it ends up being about a 2 to 1. It almost becomes more of an arcing structure rather than a pyramid when they build these things.
And approximate top width?
The maximum would be whatever would push that side down to 1.5 to 1. So I would say probably about 3 to 4 feet.
Okay.
So 4 feet would give you a 5-foot base width on each side with a 3-foot height, which would give you a 1.5 to 1. So no more than 4 feet wide on the top.
those details would be helpful in future applications.
Okay.
Seeing no other comments, Glenn, we have two hands. From?
Computer name says Charlie McGovern.
Okay, proceed. Proceed with comments. He got his mic on.
This is Charles Sturgis. I live at 3 Millwheel Lane, Newark, Delaware. I'm concerned that Mr. Scott is pointing out how that's going to be constructed, and we haven't really seen how those revised drawings were put out. He stated that he didn't have enough time for the other drawings, but he had enough time for something that apparently was happening that just changed a whole bunch of stuff on what the original permit was. I think Mr. Woodward said that most of this application is VMR property, not the village property, so I'm confused.
Thank you for your comments. We have another hand up. Please proceed to the mic. State your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Sandy Spicer Glave, and I will live at 62 Johnson Road. So Johnson Road is the road that's right adjacent, or it runs into this road that goes around the curve. I have a question about in the paper, it said that on that, let's see, what is this called? On the existing stone groin on the property that runs to the side of that, it's outside of this picture, it's right there, you'd be standing on it. The groin that runs there.
Mm-hmm.
In the paper, it said that they were going to extend it, let's see, it'll be lengthened 30 foot, and a 50-foot spur would be added. That's what was stated in the paper. And of course, you know, is that still the plan is what my question is. It's not still a part of the plan. So that's changed.
Brian or?
Yeah, I can speak to that, and I'll, hopefully the last person who commented on the phone is also still listening, because this comment will also apply to their comments and questions. Mr. Scott's proposal originally looked like this, looked like exactly what the revision is, except for omissions, and that's why it's okay for you guys to proceed and vote on this today, because there's no new footprint. If anything, the omissions have occurred within that right-of-way area just because it became disputed by neighbors early on in the process. And so this part, and this part have all been omitted to avoid any intrusion onto that 50-foot property right-of-way. And the only thing that's being proposed are these two groins here that were previously part of the proposal. It's just now that the request has been slimmed down to only ask for those two things.
Okay, so also, as you can see there is no beach there anymore. And so they're wanting to create a beach, is my understanding. But given that the problem on the corner is, I mean, if you can see the pictures, it's clearly eroding not only the road, but it's also onto their property, Sharon and Mike's property. So the objection too is, you know, why would they want to make these plans to build up a beach for themselves instead of using the community beach that's already there and protecting their property? I mean, I just don't understand. So that's it.
Thank you for your comments. And Glenn, we have additional comments? Okay, we're going to cut these comments off. It appears to me that these projects and these neighbors, this is not a venue for neighbors to feud. Let me just state that. I want to ask one very simple question of Mr. Barnes and Mr. Woodward. Brian, what I was understanding you to say, that the original application has been revised and lessened. And do you consider this a complete application that the board can act on?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Woodward, same question.
Do I consider it to be a complete application?
Yes.
Of the board? Yes, I do.
And not an expansion of the original application, but a lessening.
It was a reduction of the footprint of the impacts, and the majority of the reduction of the impacts was actually channelward of your jurisdiction, which was the spur coming off of the breakwater, which I just sketched here would probably be the solution if the neighbors could all get together to do it. Who pays for it? I don't know. Who draws it up? I don't know. To get to your question, yes, I believe you guys have a complete application that's been properly advertised, notified. The hearing is being held now. You've taken public comment, and you can render a decision lawfully.
Thank you for your endorsement. I'm now open to a motion by board to act on the application that we have in hand as submitted.
I'll move that we approve as revised.
Second?
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous?
And Hap, that was you on the second on that? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Our next application is Robert Cinco, VMRC number 220548. Will? And representing Mr. Scott?
Yes, Joseph Scott, P.O. Box 315, Kilmarnock, Virginia 22482.
Robert Senko requests permission to construct a 100 linear foot riprap revetment channelward of an existing timber bulkhead along the shoreline of the Rappahannock River located off of VSH 680 Teague Road on Pinewood Road, tax map number 19-13B, VMRC number 22-0548.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, riprap in front of an existing failing timber bulkhead on a very active shoreline as well. That's hardened on both sides. The riprap height is going to just barely crest what is there because there are some patents that have deposited themselves in that area behind the old bulkhead in front of the new rock, in front of the rock that's on the way back shore. So I guess you don't really quite call it a sill. It's a sill for patents. It's a revetment in front of a failing timber bulkhead. I don't know. It needs to be done because if you were able to get down there, you probably were, but the tide was probably too high. You can already see where it's being breached, and it's actually washing out all of those patents. So by the time they put a little bit of sand in there and throw the rock in front of it, everything should regenerate and until we get another one of these types of storms. But at least it'll have something in front of it to hold the sand in. And there's already an existing footprint of scour stone in front of it, so.
Okay,
And I guess,
thank you.
do you have any questions?
Mr. Barnes, any concerns or comments, questions?
No comment. Other than, this proposal is being done in this way to preserve the wetlands that are there. And it's also, especially in the pictures in your application, you can see the remnant bulkhead that's behind that little scour protection is beginning to go.
Mr. Woodward? Comments?
No comment, no concerns.
Thank you. Any other comments or concerns? Glenn, do we have anybody? Anything? Any questions or comments from the board? No. I'll entertain a motion.
Recommended we approve the application as submitted.
Second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. I want to pause here a second, folks. And just share some things with, as long as Roger and Joey are sitting here, I wish Craig would have been here, but I'll tell you, seeing what was happening this week with the high tides, with extreme conditions, we had 11 hearings today, applications, and we couldn't even get to 5 of them. But it amazes me how some landowners want to build in the worst, most high-risk, vulnerable places in this county. And I'm really concerned about, some of these places how long these treatments are going to last based on what we see with sea level rise. And I'm not sure we're using big enough rock yet. Roger and we talked about this a little bit later, but it's just amazing to me to see how close people want to get to the water. And we saw the news this week down in North Carolina in the Outer Banks with some more houses going into the ocean. And I fear that we're setting people up to do the same. Also want to express some concern to particularly the consultants today. It just, as we go around the county, and I think with the building boom, Brian, you might agree, we're seeing total and complete disregard for the Bay Act. We got violations all over the place. And I plead with you consultants to help the landowners to understand that natural vegetation is a good thing and that tall fescue, mowing right down to the rock, is a bad thing. That a little bit of natural vegetation and not weed eating the whole front yard down to the shoreline is not a good thing.
Yeah.
And I just wish you could help us to do that. We see time and time again, vegetation stripped and mowing right up to the escarpment when simple things could help the shoreline treatment work. The other thing I got to preach a little bit on is in future applications, Mr. Woodward, I hope you can help me on this, but we can't consider omitting living shoreline considerations as a cost factor. We're not doing a living shoreline because it costs too much is not a consideration that we can have. And the justification to dismiss living shoreline treatments it's not sufficient to say the contractor and I decided that a living shoreline wouldn't work. That's not a basis. The standard treatment, traditional treatment, has been to do rock. Not acceptable. This phase, another statement I've seen over the last several years, this phase completes rocking the entire property. That's not an acceptable statement either. Things like water depth, fetch, aspect, boat wake impacts are reasons to dismiss living shorelines. But because we don't want to do it or we haven't done it is not an acceptable reason. Thank you for that sermon. Time. Next on the list, David Kim and VMRC 22-0784. Mr. Scott?
Yes, Joseph Scott, P.O. Box 315, Kilmarnock, Virginia 22482. I'm the agent for the applicant.
David Kim requests permission to construct a 100-foot linear stone sill with associated nourishment and plantings and a 40-foot linear feet of riprap revetment along the shoreline of the western branch of the Currituck River, located off VSH 604 Mary Point Road on Palmer Lane, tax map number 21-38G, VMRC number 22-0784.
Yes, this is before you that has a living shoreline 2 aspect of it, but unfortunately there are 2 sections of it that need to have a revetment, so that's why we're here. They're on the section A that's on the east side of the property. Mr. Kim wants to try to build a small return there. That property adjacent to him, it doesn't have any improvements on it. It's a farm field and it just continues to erode. This was not necessary the first time. I've been up here before for these folks. It wasn't needed, but it's then come in there and it's kind of eaten it away. So he has to kind of keep doing what he can do to protect that area. until, or if the neighbors ever do anything, and they probably won't because it's a farm field. I mean, it's kind of cost prohibitive, so. And then in section B, there's a pine tree there that originally we were hoping to possibly try to incorporate into the living shoreline portion of this, but with these storms since last October, I think this is about our 6th one that we've had that's had sustained battering. We're just gonna go ahead and put a revetment around those trees to keep them there for good, and then extend beyond that the living shoreline aspect where there is a much better, the trees are further back, the elevation is the right elevation, putting some sand in there and trying to reestablish the plantings because there was already plantings growing there. But this has a pretty good wide open southern fetch too. So hopefully it can stand up to the battering, but I think by doing this and the fact that there's already so much vegetation behind it existing, that, it'll stand up a little better by having some stone out in front of it to break some of that activity that comes in there. And I guess if you guys have any questions.
Thank you. Any comments, Mr. Barnes? Questions?
No, sir.
Mr. Woodward?
No comment?
Anyone online or in the audience wants to comment? Nope. Nope. Board members, questions or concerns?
No.
I will entertain a motion.
Move that the project be approved as presented.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. Mr. Scott, I want to thank, I would like you to extend our appreciation to this landowner for really working to protect the natural resources in this area. He's definitely doing this to protect those resources down there in and around the dock. He wouldn't have to do anything. It's obvious that sea level rise here going up into the big marsh is killing the trees. It's coming up, so please extend our appreciation for, this is to me a strictly natural resource protection of the property, but also the surrounding area, so thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, Kirk and Barbara Van Tine, VMRC number 22-0284. Representing Van Tines today,
Yes.
Mr. McKinley.
Roger McKinley, 691 Mill Point Drive in Heathsville, Virginia.
Kirk and Barbara Van Tine request permission to construct 60 linear foot riprap revetment along the shoreline of Indian Creek located off VSH 650 Fleets Bay Road, tax map number 29-57C and VMRC number 22-0284.
Oh, thank you. Hey, and we have a picture, I see.
Helping you out all we can, Roger.
Thank you. We visited this site last year for a small section of riprap sill that you see there at the base of your photograph. The application that we've submitted now takes us from the end of that all the way over to the property line with Mr. Palmer. That area also is protecting a large pond that goes up into the owner's property adjacent to their home. And so it's really critical that they keep that a pond and not allow that to become part of Indian Creek when that remaining spit disappears. So that's the intent of this application, and as well as the one adjacent to it, which is next on the agenda. They are together. There is a match line on the drawing showing how those two projects connect. And so I can't imagine, except by looking at this picture, what has happened to that little spit that remains between the creek and the pond, but that looks pretty bad considering the way it looked the last time I was there.
We can roll to the next slide here on the adjacent property to also see this from the other direction.
Goodness, okay. Who gave you a golf cart?
No, we didn't get to ride in it.
No, we walked.
Is this the Palmer property?
This was yesterday.
Okay, wow. Well, it looks pretty bad. So on Mr. Palmer, you want to?
Keep on, no, I just want to show the board, some of the board members weren't able to be here, Roger, so
Yes,
if we
sir.
can, go on down, Glenn. Yep, keep on going. There's a shot back from Mr. Palmer looking at the applicant, and you can see the pond to the right.
Yes, sir, I see. That's a great picture.
All right?
So that's what we're trying to protect. There are SAVs in the area there. I know either further up or further down. We had another project where we tried to do something offshore, and it was turned down because of submerged aquatic vegetation. But in this case, we're trying to continue an existing revetment or sill that has worked very well over to the property line of the Van Tines and then continuing on. Mr. Palmer has a timber bulkhead that's probably right about where the person with the camera is standing. So we need to protect that. That is a whole lot worse than it was when I was back there in February, I think it was, that we did this. So that's what we're asking for those two projects. They'll be both done at the same time. Minimal disturbance. We may actually come down the Palmer side, which would be easier. I was there on Tuesday, and it was a river between the spit and the house. So, I mean, there was no way that we could have had access to that. So that's what we want to do, the same thing we did last year, only continue it across all the way to Mr. Palmer's bulkhead.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Barnes, comments, questions?
No comments. I just wanted to point out the agent, Mr. McKinley, felt that this was not in our jurisdiction. Part of me presenting this to you to hear is also a jurisdictional determination by you all. I personally feel it's in the both projects were well within the Wetlands Board jurisdiction, but I just want to point that out in case that comes up.
Thank you. Mr. Woodward?
No
Comment?
comment.
Anyone online or in the audience wants to comment? None online? Board questions or comments?
Are we going to vote on both of these together?
No.
No.
Nope.
Separate?
Nope. One at a time. We did have opportunity to visit with both Mr. and Mrs. Van Tine yesterday, and I guess maybe refreshing my memory, learning from back when her father owned the property that pond was actually a lagoon for his hog operation, and that would probably be a disastrous environmental issue should a breach occur, and what stuff is in the bottom of that pond that could be releasing nutrients is.
Wow.
So that to me is a major environmental, even though the top of that area is probably outside our jurisdiction. I think the environmental consequences allowing that to breach, which, Roger, I have no doubt that one of these days it probably will with sea level rise, but at least we could do some remediary treatment now. I'm also, I know we talked about this maybe a year ago, Brian, but the issue with VIMS and some submerged aquatic vegetation. Yesterday we were out there, I mean, pounding, the waves were pounding in there. These pictures don't capture it, but this to me begs for offshore breakwaters to try to stop the velocity and force of those waves coming in. And it's too bad that because there's a patch of salve out there that couldn't be part of the project. But this, if we keep getting this kind of water, you could just see the activity yesterday. You know, it was pounding in there big time. So, no other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve as submitted.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. Next application we have is for George Palmer, VMRC 220361. Mr. McKinley?
Good morning. Roger McKinley, 691 Mill Point Drive in Heathville, Virginia.
George C. Palmer requests permission to construct a 90-foot of revetment along the shoreline of Indian Creek, located off of VSH 650 Fleets Bay Road on Blue Water Farm, tax map number 29-57D, VMRC number 220361.
Thank you. It's really awesome that you all were able to get out there and get this picture. The tide level that we see in this picture, would you say that's a normal high tide from your observations yesterday? Or could you even guess?
We found your stakes, we found the property line, who knows? I mean,
Okay.
as Jay said, the state's gaining more land every day. Free,
And aren't we all the state?
it's free.
So you're welcome.
The Commonwealth. Land acquisition's raging.
The Commonwealth, yes. Tax-free.
So, from the picture and the amount of erosion that's taken place, let me see what the date of my application was. Goodness. Yeah, some of these go back a ways.
February 1st.
February 1st. Wow. It's definitely something that's needed here. I think, I can't say for sure, but hopefully the timber bulkhead that was there was still there when you took these pictures.
It was, but I would say your work's going to continue. I hope future projects include breakwaters.
Yeah. So anyhow, we're asking for a revetment here to tie into the one that we do for the Van Tines and to also tie into the existing timber bulkhead that's there. And he may have to end up raising that or putting rock in front of it or, who knows?
Thank you. Mr. Barnes, comments, questions?
No comment.
Mr. Woodward?
I'll just take this opportunity where we're talking about breakwaters and submerged aquatic vegetation. VMRC has issued permits for projects, for breakwater projects that impact defined beds of SAV in the Commonwealth. Grayland Horn is a case in point. We continue to try to work with VIMS to provide a balance because, again, in these really shallow areas, it's likely that SAV may come, but SAV is going to go. They're going to be ephemeral beds that pop up, last a little while until the next storm comes in. In shallow areas, the heat gets to them. The wind-related storm activity kicking up the bottom gets to them. So there had been some discussion years ago, and maybe it'll be where we go in the future, that breakwaters, even in areas where there's SAV, provided the water is no more than a foot deep and no deeper than 6 or 8 feet deep, there's going to be a band where that SAV is likely to persist. On either edge of that band, it's too deep, there's not enough light, or it's too shallow and there's too much disturbance. But, we're hopeful that, just like with living shorelines, we didn't used to encourage people to move offshore with the structure. It was always, bring it back as close to the bank as possible and let the rest of it go to the Commonwealth. So we'll get there, and in fact, the Van Tines did get some breakwaters, even though there was some SAV. And had you walked up to that area, they got a beautiful beach area behind those breakwaters.
With sand accumulating.
That the sand that came in during storms overtops the breakwater, and when the water recedes, the sand stays, and the breakwater works fine.
Good case study, good case study.
Right, so. But in this case, there's no jurisdiction for VMRC, so I don't have any additional comment.
I'm glad you never have comments. Mr. Barnes, I really appreciate your comments on jurisdiction, but, I know with the experience of this board, the board's entirely capable of determining jurisdiction, and in this vote, we'll state that we believe with this evolving dynamic system out there, it's going to be, everything here is going to be in jurisdiction with, if it keeps going. Do I entertain a motion? Motion?
Motion. For the, I make a motion, we take this as it was presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by your right hand. Motion carried. Thank you, Roger. Next on our agenda is Jesse Crotty, VMRC application 220436. Representing Mr. Crotty.
Roger McKinley, 691 Mill Point Drive, Eastville, Virginia.
Jesse Crotty requests permission to construct 174-foot linear feet of riprap revetment in place of an existing bulkhead and 171 linear feet of riprap revetment against the face of an existing bulkhead along the shoreline of Carter Creek located off VSH 757 St. Andrews Lane on Golf Course Drive, tax map number 27B-2-2, and VMRC number 22-0436.
I'm trying to find it in the ad, because something you said. Here it is.
174.
174.
Existing bulkhead, 171 in front of the bulkhead. Is that correct?
That is correct, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry,
That's how it was
I just wanted to make sure that we got the 174 and the 171 correct.
Although I do make mistakes
Not for long, Brian.
occasionally.
You just can't resist, can you?
Just point out.
So
Go
we
ahead,
have,
proceed, Roger.
I'm sorry, excuse me. We have a case here of an existing deteriorating bulkhead, of which 171 feet is salvageable to the extent that we're proposing a riprap revetment to be placed up against that existing bulkhead on filter cloth. The 174-foot section is not stable enough to sustain a riprap revetment placed up against it. So that 174-foot section of bulkhead will be removed, and a riprap revetment will be placed up against the base of the existing bank. It's probably, what would you guess, 25, 30 feet high?
Yes, sir.
Very hard to access. I don't know if you all were able to look at this one or not, but so that 174, that bulkhead will be removed, and the rock will be placed up against the base of that eroding bank. So it's two parts. One is up against an existing bulkhead, and one is where the bulkhead will be removed.
Mr. Barnes, any comments, questions? I would say before you start that this site has not been visited by all board members, but yours truly lives right across the creek from this site. And I've witnessed the situation here over the last 15 years. The project we had on our properties, same kind of creosote that I describe as Swiss cheese, where it's eaten out, lots of bank erosion occurring behind the old bulkhead. The portion of the rock on the front side that'll be placed against the bulkhead is pressure-treated, salt-treated lumber. The antique version is the old creosote, which is probably plus 50 years old.
I would think.
That's given away. So while we don't have boots on the ground this week, you couldn't see anything anyway because the whole thing was submerged.
No, you couldn't.
But I think Mr. Woodward had some pictures in here. But this is a very, I guess, probably 20, 25 feet above creek level. The property is much needed. So, Mr. Barnes, comments?
Yeah, this is in your jurisdiction in parts, some is not, but it's not, as you mentioned, a huge habitat impact. And the the lot is so small, the bank is so high, the improvements that have actually been there for quite a while, very close. This is a unique case where you don't have a lot of negative impact, but if nothing is done, you could have some serious infrastructure falling in the creek. Nevertheless, it needs a permit.
Thank you. Mr. Woodward?
Again, a portion of this does require our permit where he's going, the rock in front of the salvageable or serviceable bulkhead, but we wait on the Wetlands Board before we issue our permit.
Okay. Board member concerns or comments, or as a witness, not quite an adjacent property owner, I could answer. I would say this erosion is active because of severe boat wakes. And even though maybe, possibly, fetch and aspect would allow a living shoreline, the boat wakes would tear it up. This is not in a no-wake zone. It's between two no-wake zones. And while I disagree with Roger that no alternative is existing, there probably is an alternative, but this is probably the best. I did ask Roger yesterday, and he might want to expound on a couple items. The one that two different slopes on the rock when it's impacted by equal boat wakes, plus the fact, and Mr. Woodward too, the creosote issue, and I know we've dealt with this before about removal and disposal and proper sites. Does the state have any issues with that?
They would have to, the creosote bulkhead that is to be removed will need to be disposed of lawfully, and you can't just take it to any old landfill. We don't require the removal of old creosote. It's everywhere throughout Tidewater. It's locking it up inside stone so it doesn't continue to fail is probably a better option than just leaving it exposed.
Roger, any comments?
Yeah, I was just looking at the two cross-sections. The one for the bulkhead riprap is pretty typical of what this contractor and some others do. It's 2-to-1. You got 4.5 to 5 feet up to the top of the whaler on the wall, a 2-to-1 slope going out on filter cloth. A little bit of difference, I think, on the cross-section for the part that's up against the bank. It's a 1.5 to 1 slope instead of a 2. And I was not able personally to get down and take a look at it. I had to take the contractor and my helper's word for it. But we're proposing that it be 4 feet high. I mean, we can always make an adjustment if things dictate, from the situation that they be that way. But I understand your question. I don't have a solution to it right now.
Well, we're just here to act on your application. I'm just concerned about the kind of traffic that hits these things, and knowing we have the same challenge right next door.
Yeah, of which I'm not familiar with, but I can see the resulting damage, that has occurred from that traffic in other areas.
Yeah. Questions or concerns from the board? Roger, all work, I guess, here with this elevation would be done by water?
I would think so. I mean, it's going to be impossible to get a piece of equipment anywhere else in there. And Carter Creek is certainly accessible by barge with an excavator on it. So that's been the normal procedure in things like this, where with landscaping and the way that the house occupies about 95% of the lot, that you have to do it from the water.
I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes.
I would also like to comment, this house is a recent new landowner,
Yes.
and knowing the previous owner, and the person that sold this property. Mr. Barnes, I would like, and Roger, I'd like your help on this too. The complete stripping of the RPA is an apparent violation from what was there. And I don't know who did it, but I hope we can work with landowners to try to get some native vegetation, maintain view, but to have folks out there with chainsaws day after day stripping the RPA is only going to make matters worse. And I don't probably guess that the current landowner did that, but I'd like the application, Brian, the approval letter to include some words about complying with the Code of Virginia and the ordinances of this county, because there's lots of people watching things, and I'm one of them, that, I mean, day after day of chainsaw work was not limbing up. So,
Man, been doing this almost 14 years, and my joke in the office is always, guys, we could have a job forever, comma, if you want it. I don't know what it is about this place, and as y'all know, most of y'all who know me personally, I was born 655 miles south of here, and I can tell you in the Deep South, we like trees, we like bushes, we're not afraid of snakes, we like nature, we like crickets. Moving here has been such an eye-opener 20 years ago to see the way that people here disregard nature and bushwhack banks, and I grew up with live oak trees and Spanish moss, and I've been to Darius Rucker, a famous singer. I've been to his house in South Carolina and hung out with him at his pool, and just beyond his pool deck, the natural grasses are chest high. There's Spanish moss hanging down over your head. That's what people want. That's what looks pretty to us. Here, it's a cultural thing. After doing this for so long and banging my head against the wall and getting concussions from it, it's just the culture of the people who move here. It's what's sold to them. A water view, a water view, a water view. Never mind that the water is polluted. Rappahannock River is one of the most polluted rivers in the eastern part of the United States. Why do you want a view of that? It doesn't make any sense to me. There's a good documentary available on the internet now. I urge every one of you and anyone listening to watch it. It's called Think Like a Watershed. It was put out by the Bay Journal last year. It shows the things like the lowly beaver, what he can do to turn things around. As y'all know, I'm getting ready to go back into a different phase of my life. You will see me again, because something I'm going to do that is desperately needed around here is growing nursery stock for native plants and things that restore these banks. For years, I've been going out with a piece of metal rod and showing some of these homeowners with little plugs of switchgrass and eastern gamagrass here, just where this bank is eroding, plug these bad boys in here and leave it alone. Don't bushwhack it, don't touch it. Leave the Scott's 10-step plan to lawn addiction alone. I used to have the most high level of chemical applicator license you can get in the United States, a fumigation license. I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole most of the chemicals that are used on 90% of the yards around here. They're deadly. And it's just, I don't get it. It's a job forever, but another thing I'm going to work on is lobbying, DEQ. The Bay Act is extremely flawed. You should never use the word preservation in a law's title anyway, because preservation is dead on arrival. Conservation, see, it should say Chesapeake Bay Conservation Act. The bay is destroyed already. All we're trying to do is conserve what's little bit is left. So that's the beginning of that. There's no teeth, there's no backup, there's no criminal side to these codes. It's a long process that ends up with the pollution lasting for months or even years before the lawyers are done with it. And by then, as y'all know, the geomorphology of these areas, in one case, our Flamea case that died when it went to the legal level, nature has taken all that violation back. Same thing with the Windmill Point violation. So I've realized that my effort, I care truly about the environment. My effort's better spent outside of what I've been doing. So that's kind of my statement on that is the Bay Act needs extreme revisitation, and when it comes back, it needs to, Virginia's 30 years behind the time anyway, but it needs to have a lot more teeth to it and a lot more backup for staff. That's why you see these violations you see. 200 miles of shoreline in a county and one person. And people who have an extreme incentive. It's perverted to think that a $100,000 lot, once nature's destroyed on it, is all of a sudden worth $300,000. Archaeologists 2,000 years from now sifting through our bones are just going to say, what were these people thinking? And the last thing I'll leave you with is something that you guys remember, Ms. Powhatan. I remember his name was Opie Chankanud, the chief of the Powhatan people. His brother came to him and said, don't worry, brother, about these people who are building this crazy fort down the river. I've seen what they're doing. They're pooping and peeing in the river, and then they're drinking out of it. They're going to be gone soon. You don't have to worry about them. And we're still doing the same thing. Here we are 400 years later. We're still doing the same stuff, but we've multiplied.
I knew I could get you wound up. Anything else by the board? Let's vote on this particular application. Do I hear a motion?
Move the project be approved as presented.
Second.
All those in favor, right hand. Motion approved.
Thank you.
And the next application is Mr. Scott Barr, VMRC 22-057. Mr.
Roger
McKinley?
McKinley, 691 Mill Point Drive, Peaceville, Virginia.
Scott A. Barr, request permission to construct a 140-foot linear foot riprap revetment along the shoreline of Beach Creek located off of VSH 627 Tunings Ferry Road on Hazelip Lane, map number 25-124D, VMRC number 22-0457.
Well, we were fortunate enough to get to view this site since the bank is 25 feet high. We're proposing to do this riprap revetment behind an existing marsh fringe or pieces of isolated vegetated wetlands that are there. It will be up against the existing eroding bank and with no impacts to the existing vegetation on the downstream or southern side. When we got into an area where the vegetation was actually grown up to the bank, we stopped and came in behind the little bit of vegetation that was offshore, and that's been the case on the other two areas as well. So those areas of grass will not be impacted. So we're asking for a permit to build 140 linear feet of riprap revetment.
Any, Mr. Barnes, any questions, concerns?
No comment, other than we did get to see this site, and you could see quite a bit of the extent of this project, and I appreciate Mr. McKinley meeting us out there, even though the weather was pretty rank.
And I believe we have a landowner here, too.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yeah, indeed.
Mr. Barr is here.
Mr. Woodward, comments, questions?
No comment.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to speak to this? Board, comments, questions? Entertain a motion.
Recommend that the board approve the application as submitted.
Second.
Signify by raised hand for approval. Motion
Thank you.
carried. Last application today is Rennie and Lena Barnes, VMRC number 22-0599.
Roger McKinley, 691 Mill Point Drive, Eastville, Virginia.
Rennie and Lena Barnes request permission to add 101 linear foot of armor stone riprap revetment to an existing revetment with associated filling and planting along the shoreline of Fleets Bay, located off VSH 647 Akron Road on Bald Eagle Road, tax map number 35-82C, and VMRC number 22-0599.
Thank you. Awesome picture, a lot different.
We have another one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Roll the next one, Glenn. Same, looking from an adjacent property towards the barns.
Okay. Yeah, those were the people that were here earlier today. There is an existing revetment there across the front of this property, which adjoins another piece of property that the Barnes own. So they purchased this, and the project that we're proposing is to raise the height of the existing revetment that's there to equal the height of the existing revetment that is on the Barnes other lot. That whole lot is going to be proposed to be filled, but especially the section that we're doing, we're proposing to fill and vegetate that. There's one small area of existing vegetation. I'm not sure. Have you seen that site, Brian? Do you know what that grass is? Was it Disticulus or what was it? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, Disticulus spicata.
Yeah. So we're trying to preserve the lot, and we feel that the existing revetment that's there is not sufficient to protect it. So we're proposing to add 4 more feet, making it equal to the height of the other rock structure on the Barnes lot on the point, with sand backfill, and we'll plant it up.
Mr. Barnes, comments, questions?
Only comments, just, inside baseball stuff so everybody understands. In discussing this with Mr. McKinley when this was coming in, and actually with the property owner many months ago when she first purchased the parcel. Of course, she lives in the house on the end. This was an adjacent lot that came up for sale. This one's right on the edge of your jurisdiction. However, reworking the armor stone rock is a jurisdictional habitat. So reworking a piece of habitat needs a permit. The upland area, Mr. McKinley did provide where that vegetated area will be preserved so that you're not filling wetlands. The fill will take place behind that. So we're not allowed to permit a wetland loss. So all those features are good. The height here is probably the best that you can do. As you can see in those pictures, even that day, the tide is beginning to push all the way through the whole lot. So it's a low situational area, and with, I think we're at 9 millimeters annual sea level rise. This approach, you can keep adding to it and allow those wetlands to grow, because wetlands are going to creep landward as time goes by. That was all.
Mr. Woodward?
Because of the slope that they're proposing, there is some additional encroachment channelward on the state bottom, so we need to issue a permit as well, but I have no other comment.
Good. Mr. Barnes, would you consider this property to be all wetlands?
Would I? Or you?
Ask him, Mr. Barnes.
As I said to Mr. Woodward earlier about another issue, Adrian Jennings, who was Army Corps engineer around here for over 30 years, he trained me a lot over the years, and other training I took as well. And I can hear him always saying to you or to me, when you're in the field, you're there to look at what you're looking at today. If you see a wetland and it has all the 3 jurisdictional features that make a wetland. It doesn't matter that 200 years ago somebody dug that out to create that wetland. It's still a wetland. So is it a wetland today? No, not the whole lot. If nature were left to do her own thing, would you come back and see a coastal dune, beach, maritime coastal forest kind of upper marsh area? Probably undoubtedly, but that's not what you have today. You have to have three things to have a wetland. You have to have hydrology, you have to have soil, hydrophytic soil, and hydrophytic vegetation. That vegetational layer is gone because it's been mowed and managed like that. So it's not, I think your wetlands are confined to right behind the rock area. But if you left it alone, come back in 10 years, it's probably going to be very, very coastal. I'll just say that. Maybe not a wetland, but very coastal.
Those three criteria describe a non-tidal.
Sure, that's true. Yeah, and it's,
And to be a tidal vegetated wetland, it needs to be contiguous with mean low water through mean high water, 1.5 times the elevation. So in this case, Disticlus is certainly a tidal wetland species. But one could argue that, yes, the species is there, but it's a non-jurisdictional wetland. It's a wetland, but it's not a jurisdictional wetland because the riprap breaks up the contiguity, potentially. I mean, with the bulkhead, that's the case. With the intertidal riprap is the habitat, just like you said. You know, if the tide rises and falls on it, that's an intertidal area. Well, there's no vegetation. Well, it's a non-vegetated intertidal area, whether it be sand or oyster shell or rock or what have you. So anyway, that's
Thanks.
my 3 cents.
Thanks. Any questions, comments from board members? Roger, just to clarify here, you're specifying Class 2 stone on this?
Yes, up to 1,500 pounds.
And what, I don't see any elevations here or slope on that front slope. Can you specify that? What's the slope of the rock? I don't see any measurements.
Well, it's going to be a 1.5 or 2-to-1 slope. I mean, that's our standard. Did I not put that on there?
Just tell me what it is.
It's 2-to-1.
Okay? And we're going how high above mean high?
Looks like 4 feet.
More? Okay. So it'll match up basically to the picture there on Mr. Barnes's property across? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Entertain a motion?
Move the project be approved as it's presented.
Second?
All those in favor signify by raising your right hand.
Thank you.
Motion carried.
And I would just like to say that I wish Brian the very, very best in his future endeavors, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing him around, but thank you for all of your help over the years that you've been here, and I know that part of that has been very frustrating for you. But anyway, I wish you the very best. Thank you, Board.
Appreciate that.
I concur. Good luck.
Thanks, man.
I want to take, if it's agreeable to the board, I'd like to take a 5-minute break, reconvene for a couple loose items here.
Okay.
And the hearings are closed. Appreciate everybody's cooperation. We moved through a lot of them. So we've got some old business I'd like to discuss.
Does any of that involve anything that I'm involved in?
No,
Okay, so we can go ahead.
no, I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. How are you?
All right. Okay.
We're going to reconvene. Thank you for that pit stop. I just want to make a couple comments there from a personal standpoint. I think I met Brian Barnes maybe first or second week. He became a county employee, and it's been my privilege to share ideas, frustrations, sometimes agree on something, and his, I guess, his quest and mine for helping landowners protect natural resources. And that's one thing that I really treasure from both Jay and Brian is to, and also the consultants here in this room, that, you know, we can work together and really do a lot of good work, and this county is, should be proud of that. Landowners spend a lot of money in this county without any tax dollars, and it's my privilege to serve as a volunteer and to be part of that over the years. I do want to touch on a couple loose ends since Mr. Barnes had his swan song trip in the wonderful Ford Explorer. We made it back without breaking down.
Yeah.
But a couple things I think we need to get in the minutes or get on the queue for whenever our future meeting would occur down the road after Brian leaves. But you mentioned, Brian, we had 2 violations of about a year and a half old. Should we have those been disposed of, or what's the status?
They have not been officially disposed of, but they're effectively dead because the Flamia case, when it went to county attorney, you know, this isn't an official determination, but it basically failed. That person had a lawyer, disputed a lot of things. The 2 lawyers decided that Mr. Flamia would reapply, but no real time limit was given on that. He's had Mr. Palubinsky develop a drawing for it, I think, or whatever, or begin that process, but that's never been submitted. And now the property's for sale. May
So
already
we
be
would,
sold.
we would say it's still open, it's not been closed out by the
Well,
county attorney?
technically, it is still open. It's
Okay.
not been officially disposed of or dismissed in any way, but
Maybe
I give it very
levels
little
taken,
chance of-
sea levels taking care of it?
I went to the site a few weeks ago, and a lot of the gravel is still there. I'm sure if you start digging around, you're going to find it, but it's been scattered to the 4 winds.
Okay.
And the whole entire property's been underwater numerous times in the last 72 hours.
If he sells that, do the new owners inherit the problem, or what happens?
Well, since nothing was filed with the circuit court, the new owners would not inherit any kind of a suit.
Okay.
How about the other one?
The other one
Can you
is,
talk about that?
is in a similar status, although that didn't go forward. That's still kind of in our court, but the Rappahannock River is taking care of those rocks because there's no filter cloth laid, as y'all saw on the site, if you remember back over 2 years ago when we.
So that discharge has been washed away?
Yes. And actually, new detritus in the bank behind it has been washed out, so it's really hard to tell, is this junk and rubble from the old hotel? Is this riprap that they laid or rubble that they dumped? It's really sad to see that as well, but that's really something that you probably, going forward with somebody else, you probably don't want to pursue because there's some new management there now. They are trying to do a little better, and what was offending before, nature has removed.
Thanks. Next item I had, just to make sure we got everything recorded. Funds available for this board due to previous fines, fees, da-da-da-da-da. You mentioned that Tuesday, about $14,000 for possible training, workshops.
Correct, yeah.
About
Yeah, it's in the neighborhood of 10 to 12, 10 to 14. I could check and
Okay,
get.
could you give that to Crystal to put in the minutes?
Yeah.
I'd like to have that in the minutes. How many, as of today, how many applications do you have pending that we would come to us?
For your next meeting?
Yeah, whenever that might occur, as of this moment.
3 to 5,
Okay,
easily right now.
okay.
I have not completely reviewed all those, so I don't know if some would be NPR'd out or whatever. There are some that are LS2 that are on the borderline. If there's one we got that looks like a living shoreline project, but it lacks a few things. Remember, if you have a living shoreline project that does not qualify for the Group 2, it has to come to you. So you could build a big rock sill that doesn't meet what Jay wants to see with a Group 2 living shoreline, then it's going to need to come to you, which is okay. Maybe somebody wants that because they don't want gaps, they want higher rock, they want a different elevation, they don't quite have the fetch, whatever.
Okay. And lastly, I'd like Jay to give us anything, did anything happen in the General Assembly that would affect us as far as, I know there were some language changes to what could qualify for a living shoreline, but is there anything significant that we should be worried about?
No, nothing that is significant that's going to change things. Like you said, there was some wording to clarify the definition of living shoreline as far as structural components. So, but it doesn't change the intent of the law or how you would look at it. There was a bill that didn't go anywhere that was going to get at if you have an existing structure, now maybe you're exempt from trying to do a living shoreline because all you're trying to do is maintain that structure, whether it's rock in front of a bulkhead or beefing up an existing revetment, that kind of thing, but that didn't go anywhere.
It looked like to me some of the word changes in living shoreline broaden our flexibility on what we could use.
I think so, and I have long said that, you know, when you look at, and I'm not an attorney, but when you look at the wording in the law, you know, the law is the law, that's what got approved, and then you have to work within that wording. And, you know, if you build a groin, for example, that's a structural component, it may be shore perpendicular instead of shore parallel, none of that is in the law. You have a groin, that's a structural component, and you add sand, clean sand fill, and you plant the upper reaches. That's a living shoreline by definition, in my opinion. I actually got Tony to agree with me in one particular case way down at the end of Crab Point, where they were proposing some groins, and the site photos clearly showed that the groins that are there are holding enough beach to allow the elevation and protection of the grasses. I'm going, Tony, why is that not a living shoreline? Well, you know, it's not a shore parallel like a breakwater or a sill.
Thank you. Yep, off the top of your head, I'm trying to get a handle on future workload here. Do you have on top of your head how many applications are waiting for the county to make a determination?
I think we've slowed down. Again, there are a couple LS2s, what I will tell, the Living Shoreline General Permit 2. What I will tell you is when you all receive those applications, you have 30 days, staff or the Wetlands Board, to determine, yes, it qualifies for a Living Shoreline 2 or no, it doesn't. If we don't hear from you in 30 days, we assume it does. So while it is another thing to do, if it doesn't get done, I just wait those 30 days and we issue the Living Shoreline 2. There's one I'm going to go look at today up in Maratico. I can't think of a whole lot. I mean, this was basically a backlog of stuff. And there was quite a slug. I don't know what, you know, the agents have coming forward. I mean, you guys can tell me.
You're easily going to run, if the current trend continues, you're easily going to run 4 or 5 projects a month. And what you had, we had to skip April because of other workload requirements that I had and a couple other conflicts with board members, health-wise. So, yeah, you had 11 because you kind of had a 2-month slug. That being said, I think you can reasonably expect 3 to 5 a month if things continue on.
Could you check on that actual number and
Yeah.
let me know so we could include that in the minutes, Crystal?
Yeah, I
Okay,
can,
I want to thank board members for the endurance. We did probably, hopefully hit record speed today. And even though that I've already challenged 2 of our consultants today that they need to get into marriage counseling, do a little better job with landowners. But wait a minute, hold it. And I want to ask the board members if they have any additional comments before we officially adjourn. Anything?
I just want to say real quick before you do adjourn, thank you for all your time. I'm sorry Edna couldn't be here today. Yeah, over 13 years of doing this. This is easily, and I say it all the time, probably one of the parts of my job I've always loved the most. Most days coming here, I look forward to doing wetlands work, all kinds, getting in the field. Even the headaches today notwithstanding with property disputes that can sometimes try to lead you astray. Very enjoyable. I love working with you guys. I love your commitment and your friendships, and what you do is very important. And I think most people here in this county know that because shoreline is such a big deal in this county, and what you do does make a difference. I look back over the last 13 years of what we've approved and what we've denied and what we've steered on the right path. You go and look at those places now, most of them, the vast majority, are doing a good job and following the guidelines of the Commonwealth, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that for you guys, and yeah, it's good memories for the Wetlands Board. Thank you, and thank you, and
Best